A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Read my lips.
Welcome to Righting the Right with Larissa and Dan, the brother and sister that you'll want to argue with as much as your own.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
But it's political bullshit.
So what do you think of Dan?
He's a jackass.
Because our country is going to hell.
So what do you think about Larissa?
She has been a real disaster for a lot of people, including the Democrats, who frankly can't stand her.
They're losers, they're babies.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
And now, here's Brother Dan and Sister Larissa.
Hi, welcome back to the Righting the Right podcast. I'm Brother Dan, here with Sister Larissa.
We're going to just stick with that.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're just going to do Brother Dan and
Okay.
Sister Larissa the rest of the way. I should change my Twitter handle to Brother Dan.
Yeah, I know I should. That would be fun.
So, today we are going to talk about the Second Amendment. Like we said last time when we talked about the first, we're going to focus on the second now, which, in my opinion, is equally as important as the first.
Yeah, one can't exist without the other.
Yeah, the only reason why we still have a First Amendment is because we have a Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
At least in my opinion. I don't know for sure. Maybe people are that good. Maybe my lack of faith in government is a little kooky, but just historically speaking, look at a country that gets disarmed and look at a country that shortly thereafter loses their freedom. So,
exactly.
Few things. I've got a lot, so I apologize. This one's probably going to be predominantly me just filibustering Larissa.
Which is okay, because I'm not as educated on the topic.
So, this is the constitutional right that is most commonly under attack. And I think it's pretty much common sense at this point which side is constantly attacking it. So this being the Righting the Right podcast, I am a Second Amendment full staunch, no ifs, ands, or buts supporter. I don't believe in giving an inch on anything. So I don't like really any form of gun control. I'm very libertarian in this regard.
Yeah, where I'm a little bit stricter on it than that, but yeah.
I just feel like if you give an inch on this, it's only a matter of time before everybody's unarmed. The argument constantly being made is that the very first line is a well-regulated militia, which, yes, they're just explaining why it's necessary for the populace to be armed in order to have a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state.
But if you take away, the right to bear arms, so now you can't have guns, how can you even form a militia? That's my question.
That's not something they want to talk about. They also ignore the comma, as if it's not a second part. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Yeah, that is the right of the government.
That is the second part of the Second Amendment. There are two parts. A well-regulated militia is necessary. They told us that never lose your arms. Never let the government be the only armed force. Never let the federal government be the only armed force, or the state government. We need a balance of power on that.
Well, and then part of what is also ironic to me is a lot of Democrats don't want police power. I see, there's the huge fight against the police and the power of the police, but as soon as you take away our right to bear arms, you're giving them even more power than they already have.
It's like the argument we always say that whenever I talk about having the right to bear arms, having the right to own a gun to protect from a corrupt government, everyone's like, oh my God, you're paranoid.
Yeah.
Why would you need a gun? That's never going to happen.
And
the government's never going to be fascist.
The government's corrupt.
Yeah, the next day, Trump is literally Hitler.
Yeah. I was told that today, actually, that he is a dictator. And that, but our government's not corrupt. And so...
And it's not possible for our government to be corrupt. I'm paranoid because I think it's even a possibility. But again, you can break the Second Amendment down into, or you can't break the Second Amendment down into multiple parts. But the First Amendment, no problem with that. No law establishing the free exercise of religion, well, that's a certain thing. Or freedom of speech, well, that's this.
Means this.
No one ever makes the argument that the First Amendment is one long sentence, that the only right to freedom of speech is through the press for the free exercise of religion.
Yeah.
No one tries to say, oh, well, no, it's all three in one. But yet the right to bear arms is only related to the well-regulated militia.
But even if it was, like I said before, as soon as you take away the right to bear arms, you can't form a militia. So it still doesn't make any logical sense. Let's say that even is what it meant. It still doesn't work.
No, but it's not, though.
I know. I know
this
that.
is, again, one of those where I won't even give an inch because... And people feel like this is something that is losing steam, and it's not. The Second Amendment is constantly under attack. In 2008, the Supreme Court only ruled 5-4 that we have the right to bear arms. They were making the argument that the well-regulated militia is for the government to provide arms to the military and to the police. And that was
which is so scary because the entire purpose of the amendments, the Bill of Rights, the very first 10 amendments, that's what makes America America. And they made the right to bear arms number two. Number two, that's the importance of it. That is where the importance lies. The first being our freedoms, the second to protect our freedoms. Those are 1 and 2 that they're for a purpose. And yeah, that is scary to me. I hear a lot of people also try to say, well, look at Australia and they don't have guns. But the leaders of Australia have actually said it wouldn't work the same in America as it would in Australia. First of all, they're an island. They don't have anyone. It's harder to smuggle in weapons, right? There's also, it's just a very different setup, the way that their country is compared to our country. And even the leaders of their country have said it wouldn't work in America.
Well,
and it doesn't follow our Constitution, which is...
There's also the issue that, and again, it's one of those things that nobody ever wants to talk about. We are a melting pot. Tribalism is a real thing with human beings.
Yes.
And if and it's starting to get worse again as a society, that we're starting to segregate ourselves. If we don't coexist, there's going to be more issue, I guess. I mean, if you look at the areas where we have the highest crime rate with guns, they're large cities with a large, diverse population. The more you this sounds weird. I'm not trying to sit here. I'm not against. I love what makes America great is that we have this multicultural society. But we have to accept the reality that we are an experiment in that. We're the first society in the history of the world to exist like this. Yeah. And we're still the only society in the world that exists like this. So that's why of all the first world nations, we're going to have the highest crime rates. Because we have a bunch of different civilizations merging. Cultures. It's been only 250 years. It hasn't been that long. And that's not a long time in the context of human evolution. So I'm not saying that gun crime is okay. I'm not saying that we should just accept it, but we have to understand that, one, freedom comes with consequences. If we give up the right, do you ever want to trade your freedoms for security? And some people do, and I don't. We have to realize that freedom comes with a price. If you have the freedom to... Or I guess if you have the freedom to behave in ways that are open and free, well, we have to understand that people are going to make bad decisions. If you give the human element a choice, you're going to have bad actors, and that's going to happen. But we can't ignore the fact that that's a very, 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 very small percentage of the population. It's not indicative of American people. So I just have a hard time with this idea that America's more violent because of our gun ownership. Sweden has, or is it Switzerland? Switzerland has a higher gun ownership rate than we do in the
They're
United
actually
States.
issued guns.
It's mandatory,
Yeah.
and they are one of the least gun violent countries in the world. It's not about gun ownership. It's about the freedom that comes with it.
Well, I think that's more than that, too. I think something we lack in this country is gun education, because instead of looking and educating, because if you look at Switzerland, part of owning the gun is that they educate them. They teach children how to use the guns. They teach from a very young age what guns are. In America, we do the opposite. Guns are bad. We're taught guns are bad and avoid guns and run from guns and hide from guns, and guns are bad, instead of educating on guns and the proper use of guns. And I think that also has a lot to do with it. We teach fear instead of education. You know, we just teach, we grow up having a fear of guns, and the more we fear guns, the more we're going to improperly use them. You know, I mean, that's what fear creates.
And it's because we have a divided country, and one side is using fear as
a tactic
to try to get rid of guns. It's why every time there's a gun crime, guns are blamed. No one ever looks at any other factors.
I know.
No one. I mean.
Well, now the big thing is mental
illness is an issue, which is
yes.
why we're seeing mass murders like we are. These random acts of violence. Yeah. Most murders in this country are not random.
Yeah.
They're not.
They're domestic.
Most of them aren't domestic.
Domestic violence. Most of them are not domestic violence.
No. Most murders in this country are gang and crime related.
Yeah.
That is the overwhelming majority of them. And it's why, if you look, I looked up some statistics, and I was not surprised, but I was a little surprised by a couple. I looked at violent crime rates in this country, and of the 10 cities with the highest violent crime rates in this country, all 10 are run by Democrats. Of the 10 with the highest...
and preface here, this is per 100,000. This is not
total yes, because of
population.
course Democrat-run cities are going to be the most highly populated, and they're going to have the highest numbers. That's why everyone thinks Chicago is the murder capital. When you look at Chicago, their murder rate is actually 28.7 per 100,000. That's less than half of St. Louis, which is 59.3 per 100,000. So when you break it down, the rate of murder is significantly higher in St. Louis, in Baltimore, in Detroit, in New Orleans, over Chicago. We just think of Chicago because of the gross numbers, because it's such a highly populated city. But the actual crime rate is actually lower. It's only fifth compared to those other cities. It's actually sixth.
It's still fifth, though. It's still sixth.
And lower than Newark even. But all 10. And again, if you get into...
Newark.
If you get into violent crime rate, you look at the same thing. Chicago's not even in the top 10 in the country in violent crime rate. I don't even think Chicago's in the top 15 in the country in violent crime rate. But you look at the cities of the 10 and the highest violent crime rate, again, all run by Democrats. I was joking about it with Larissa. It seems as though the only crime that seems to be bipartisan is rape. Because when you get into it, only six of the top 10 cities in the country are run by Democrats when you look at rape statistics. Now, all of the top 5 are Democrat-run cities, and 3 of the bottom 5 are run by Republicans, and one of them currently has no mayor, but it's Corpus Christi, that is predominantly a Republican city. So we'll say 4 out of 10 are. But the point of those statistics is that of those top 10 cities and the murder rates, you have some of the strictest gun control laws. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Detroit, New Orleans. All of these cities have very strict gun control laws. But here's
what's funny is the one, Anchorage, that does not, is the number 1 rape city, right?
Yes.
They do not have a strict gun laws, and more people are being raped. So there is no guns in that equation. It's rape, right? So maybe if someone owned a gun, they might be able to stop the rape. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I don't know. I would think gun ownership is probably higher in Anchorage, so I don't know if that makes
No, that's what
sense.
I'm saying. Oh, you think that it's higher in Anchorage?
No, I'm saying if your argument is that they would own a gun
No,
to be able
I'm
to protect
saying
themselves.
I'm saying that there isn't that it's still the rape is in that city. It's not the gun crimes that are the.
Yes, Anchorage was number one by a very wide margin, but again, it's the only blue city in an entirely red state.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. All I'm getting at is people always tend to ignore statistics. People always tend to ignore the reality and react with emotion.
Well, they ignore on purpose.
The people spouting the BS ignore it on purpose. The people accepting the BS don't. Gun violence is very easy to be emotional. When you hear the statistics of 30,000 gun deaths per year, well, and you hear the statistics when the Supreme Court justice on a ruling gives you a statistics of 69 gun deaths each day in this country, and they just gloss over the fact that 2/3 of those are suicide. They're not murder rates. If you take away guns, people are still going to kill themselves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're just going to do it in a different way. They're going to overdose on pills, which are probably the cause of all the suicides. What we need to realize is, again, we do have a mental health issue in this country. I don't believe that's the rise in gun violence, because we don't have a rise in gun violence. Gun violence is at an all-time low. Murder rates are at an all-time low. This isn't a reality. It's just scarier because the media is pumping it out to us all the time. The reality is, the more armed we've become as a society, the safer we've become. If you look at the gun ownership rate as it has increased in the United States, safety has increased in the United States. If you look at the states that have the highest gun ownership rate, legal gun ownership rate, they are the safest states in the country. If you look at the cities that have the lowest gun ownership rate, they have the highest murder rates. They have the highest violent crime rates. They have everything wrong with them because gun control laws don't work. They just don't. I always ask, short of confiscation, what gun control law will actually curb gun violence?
Well, what's funny is I usually get an answer of something that already exists. When I ask people what would you change, they would say, I would do this background check. Well, they already have to do a background check, or I would do this, or I would do that. And they're things that already exist. And I think a lot of people also don't understand gun laws. I mean, me included. I don't know much about gun laws. I don't own a gun, so.
Well, and it's the media and their, now the line of the day, the word of the day calendar. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it's just their new thing is, the gun show loophole. Let's close the gun show loophole. Like, oh my God, so many people are being murdered because of the gun show loophole. I don't know of any murder ever that has happened because of the gun show loophole. I guarantee you, if it happened, they would be telling us all about it in the news every day, because that's the new one. All that does, and I'm not saying, and who cares? There is a gun show loophole. Should probably close it. As far as I understand, it's pretty much been closed anyways. We're talking about single shot rifles or revolvers that are bought as collector's items that don't require background checks. And it has to be a single shot. No semi-automatics, which is almost every gun nowadays, and everyone always argues that. I always love the term semi-automatic assault weapon.
I know. Yeah.
And it's like, you do realize an assault weapon is, by definition, just arbitrary. It's hilarious. You can take a rifle and make it look super scary, and it's not an assault weapon, but you could take a handgun and make it look completely helpless, and it could be an assault weapon.
Yeah.
Every gun,
one of those pink guns that they have now for women.
Exactly. Well, and they say, and the way they use the term semi-automatic, it's like, every gun is semi-automatic. I mean, seriously, like, do you want everyone carrying around bolt-action rifles? I mean, I think that would be much worse for society if everyone had rifles strapped over their backs. I mean, it's just dumb, and they're preying on people's ignorance. And again, I know I quote Bill Maher a lot, but he talks about, and he's a very strong pro-gun control advocate, but he says he will be the first to admit we don't need idiot liberals running around who know nothing about guns talking about gun control. We need educated liberals who know about guns talking about gun control. The problem is those don't exist because the more educated you become on guns, the more you realize gun control won't solve the problem.
Well, no. What solves the problem is evil needs to not exist anymore. I mean, that's it. As soon as you take away guns, you're only taking them away from the innocent people. You're not taking them away from criminals.
By definition.
Yeah.
When gun ownership becomes illegal, only criminals will carry them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been proven time and time again.
And I would become a criminal at that point because I would still carry.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why Chicago released their gun ban. They had a gun ban. They don't have it anymore because their crimes, their violent gun crimes went up so much because now only criminals had guns.
When did they release it?
I thought they did like 2 years ago, didn't they?
Okay. I know 2017 they actually saw a drop in murder rate compared to 2016.
So
I don't know if that's related. Yeah, I did. That's why I asked.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
It's a fairly new thing. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure on that. But anyway.
I'll throw it in the Google machine.
Yeah. Say, okay, Google.
No, I don't.
You don't use okay, Google?
No. No Alexa, no okay Google, no nothing.
No. We got Google Home, so
nope.
Now we use it all the time. But
so either way, the point is we have too many people talking about guns that don't understand guns. And
then the problem is the people that are on the opposite that are given a voice are the people that are so extreme that it's.
So sorry, I just got to interrupt this. I go to Google Chicago eliminates, and the first default is tampon tax. I didn't know Chicago had a tampon tax. So not really relevant to the conversation here, but apparently I don't know if they had a referendum. I don't know if they had a separate tax on just tampons.
They just removed tax from tampons,
That's
which
what
I've
I'm
always
guessing.
thought that we need to have because we can't help that we need those.
No, it's like a grocery.
Yeah, it is like a grocery. It's something we can't avoid. I've always thought, why are feminine products taxed? So maybe Chicago released a tax.
Yeah, Chicago says, according to the Washington Post from October 30th, 2017.
It's my birthday.
A new report found 6 in 10 illegal guns in Chicago came from somewhere outside of Illinois. Illegal guns.
Okay.
So again, that's a pretty common sense thing that they're coming from outside if they're illegal to buy inside. I don't think anyone's arguing that point.
So they didn't lift the ban?
Chicago is proof that gun laws don't work, according to NPR, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and read through my Google searches. I don't find anything showing that.
Was it in Baltimore?
Well, if it
someone released there was a gun ban, and I thought it was maybe DC.
Well, Baltimore's murder rates have skyrocketed since Freddie Gray because the police have backed off. And
that's like completely different.
Yeah, but aside from that, back to the subject at hand. Perfection is perfection. So, but
that's exactly what I thought too.
We are doing this from the young G's perspective, so. We just talked about tampons, so we might as well talk about contraceptive. So
yeah.
You never know.
Oh my gosh.
She could be earning her man. All right, this is just getting stupid now. If you haven't already turned off the podcast after that, I'm gonna just shift gears completely on this, and I want to talk about the Supreme Court because this is the one part of Trump's election that I was happiest about. Was that he was going to get to nominate a Supreme Court justice. The fact that we only had, and when I say we, I mean the pro-gun. I'm not going to get into conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, none of that. But just the fact that there was only a one justice advantage on the right to bear arms. Just because there was a one justice advantage on the right to bear arms was a scary thought that we were about to lose one of those 5 that voted to support the Second Amendment. And I can almost guarantee you Hillary would not have placed a no justice in there, or Obama wouldn't have with who he was putting in there. They would have overturned it. So here's the argument from the dissent on the Second Amendment. The dissenting said, the public safety necessity of gun control laws were the primary job of the Supreme Court, not to protect the Constitution, that their job was to worry about the public safety necessity of gun control laws.
What?
That is not the job of the court.
No, the job of the court is to uphold the Constitution.
It's their job to uphold the law, not to define the law. And that's the scary thing. And then that was when they made their quote directly after that. Guns were responsible for 69 deaths. Again, 23 deaths a day is still a lot, but 23 of them were murder. 69, 46 of those were suicide. Justice Breyer goes on to say,
and of the murders too, that some of those murders still would have happened without guns as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's any arguing that if guns went away, murder rates would go down. I'm not naive.
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue that. Like Chris Rock said, if you made bullets more expensive, you'd have no more innocent bystanders.
Well, but that's what's funny is I actually think that bullets are a good way to track things and you could literally track a person by the bullet.
If you limit bullets,
I didn't say limit bullet.
I was going to say people.
I didn't say limit.
No.
I say track bullets. I feel like the gun isn't the problem. If you mark a bullet for a person, now you're tracking the bullet and where it's going.
Yeah.
To me, that's that's the solution.
I don't know how they could do that individually for each bullet, or how you track who got the bullets, or that just feel like that would be a lot more difficult.
Same way you have a fingerprint.
You make it,
we have
but
the
they do that.
technology
But they already have the technology. They already do that.
Where you have the
each gun that fires leaves its own stamp on the bullet.
Yeah.
So they already know the bullet based upon the gun. The problem is tracking the gun back to the person, because crime is committed by illegal guns, not by legal gun owners.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. And when it does happen by legal gun owners, that's where it's domestic.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of murders that are non-gang or drug related are domestic violence related. But to continue on to DC versus Heller, this was in 2008 too, by the way. This was not that long ago. This was less than a decade ago. Justice Breyer said, and I'm going to read this slowly and emphasize things just because this is very disturbing for me. There is simply no untouchable constitutional right guaranteed by the Second Amendment. No untouchable constitutional right guaranteed by the Second Amendment. I mean, that in and of itself is ridiculous. The Second Amendment is not untouchable and is not a constitutional right. So there is simply no untouchable constitutional right guaranteed by the Second Amendment to keep loaded handguns in the house in crime-ridden urban areas. I underlined the word urban on my paper when I wrote that down. This is a very clear target on black people. The fact that when you know that politically, whenever you hear the word urban, you know that is the underlying message behind it. I think everybody realizes that. And the fact that they're trying to take guns out of crime-ridden, you can't see the quotes on my fingers right now, urban areas is very scary to me. And these were the same arguments being made in 1876. The same Supreme Court that was controlled by the same people that ruled on Dred Scott, that said that slaves were not people but property, were the same people that were making this same argument about taking guns away from black people. People want to ignore the fact that the NRA was established to protect the right to own guns for black people who were dealing with segregation and racism in the South and in the North, everywhere. People always want to ignore the role of government in everything that has gone wrong. And it's been the same people making the same arguments for 150 years.
It's the same thing about abortion and Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was literally created to abort black babies. That was the purpose of Planned Parenthood.
I know a while back I had sent you those statistics that were just disturbing about that Planned Parenthood literally had an agenda targeting black women to get abortions. And they were tweeting.
And that happened this year.
Yeah. that they were
This year.
targeting and trying to encourage, not all women, black women specifically. It's a very scary thing that I think goes ignored. And I don't think anyone on the right or left should take that for granted, that there is a deliberate movement to disarm the populace, but specifically to disarm one portion of our population.
Yeah, I agree.
And as a black person, you should be very concerned that the side that proclaims to be helping you is the side that specifically says urban areas. And again, we all know that's political speak.
Crime-ridden urban areas.
It's not coincidental that these rules are put into place, that police are put into situations and then held captive by Democratic politicians to keep crime rates high in black areas. The Second Amendment is the safest way for Americans to protect themselves, but specifically for black Americans to protect themselves. We always hear about police brutality, which I do believe is an issue in this country, and I don't believe it's along racial lines like the media portrays it. I think there is probably more issues than most people realize with everyone. We'll talk about that at another time, but absolutely there is an issue. And if you take away the power of the people to defend themselves from the police, we have a problem. I don't want people shooting police officers, and I think everyone should be respectful of police officers. Every right and every freedom comes with responsibility. And that's what nobody ever wants to talk about. That's where I get frustrated with the ultra-libertarian right.
Yeah, me too.
Is it's all about freedom, freedom, freedom with no responsibility.
Yeah.
Guess what? If you want to be a free society, you have to understand there's responsibilities that come with that. If you want the right to bear arms, you have to understand that there's responsibility on you as a safe gun owner to promote safe gun safety, to promote a safe society, that people don't want guns. If you just want the freedom without the responsibility that comes with it, you're setting yourself up to allow for these vultures to come in and pretend to be the safety brigade to then take away our rights.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to overcome. There was a great conversation with Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson the other day, talking specifically about the responsibilities of freedom. And I thought it was amazing. They talked about the responsibilities of religion. The freedom of religion comes with the responsibility of properly practicing that religion.
Yes.
So it doesn't, again, get vultured by the safety brigade. And the right to bear arms. Freedom of speech. And I say this all the time, just because you can say something doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
It's my issue with the NFL players kneeling during the national anthem isn't that they shouldn't have the right to. It's that I don't think you should do it at that moment in time. Just because you have a right to burn a Quran doesn't mean you should. Just because you have the right to draw a picture of Muhammad doesn't mean you should. Just because you have a right to dump a crucifix into a jar of urine doesn't mean you
Someone
should.
do that?
Yeah, you've never heard of the Piss Christ?
Oh no.
Yeah, it's a famous artwork in New York City. It was a long time ago. But the point is, people will do these things just to instigate. And my father-in-law is a open carry advocate. And I'm not against open carry. I'm against flashy open carry. I'm against trying to draw attention. They will their groups will get together, all armed, very flashy showing, some of them even slinging rifles over their back, just because they have the right to, and walk around the park and try to get stopped by the police just so they can cry victim.
Which only hurts your cause. That's the problem.
You lose public support.
Yeah.
And then guess what? When there is a shooting in that park, the police didn't respond to the call because of
what you did. Yeah.
The blood of innocent people is on the hands of every person who is irresponsibly using their right. Just because you have a freedom doesn't mean it's open season on anything. Just because you have the right to bear arms doesn't mean you should. It means you can. I think everyone should, as long as they're properly trained and as long as we're promoting it safely. If you don't have a gun safe, if you don't have something to protect your children, well, you're not promoting the Second Amendment properly.
Correct.
And you're part of the problem that is leading to people trying to take away our gun rights. Every person that goes out and shoots someone obviously is part of the problem. But we just need to overcome those fears that we have around something. More people die in automobile crashes than they do from gun violence.
Although I did have a guy from the New York Times argue that with me.
That he was trying to argue that more people die from gun violence?
Yes. I'm like, where did you get your statistics? And of course, no response because he's with the New York Times. But it was so ridiculous. But that's what's happening is he can just randomly tweet because he's not tweeting for the New York Times. So he can tweet stuff like that. Now there's credibility behind what he says. And then that also causes issues.
Look at what's happening in Iran right now.
Oh, I know.
Imagine if the people were armed. 28 people were killed and more than 200 were arrested. And it's probably going up. And 200 people were arrested and still detained. As far as I understand, thousands more were arrested and released on bond. But there's still 200 being detained and 28 were killed. If those people were armed, their government couldn't do that to them.
Yeah.
These are people who were uprising against fascism, which again, I thought was hilarious. ABC tweeted out a story blaming Trump for the deaths of the 28 people because the Iranian government said that the protests got out of hand because of Trump's support for the protesters. ABC literally tried to tweet out the story. ABC did, a lot of other people, but ABC was the most egregious, that said the deaths were basically Trump's fault.
Because he supported
the uprising against a fascist government.
Yeah.
That's where we've come now, that this right-left dynamic has just lost its mind. Freedom should be our number one priority over everything. Over safety, over security, over everything. And then the responsibility of that freedom should lead to the safety and security. That's where we need to do that.
I think no one wants to take responsibility for themselves on anything. I mean, that's just where we're at. I mean, it's just blame, point fingers. You are responsible for you and your family and nothing more. That's what you're responsible for. You're not responsible for me. You're not responsible. But everybody wants to tell me what I do while they don't live that same life. And they point fingers and don't want to be responsible for any of the actions they take.
I think what you mean by responsible is you mean by your own actions.
Yes,
You're responsible for
yes,
your own actions.
Correct.
I do think this is where, again, I lose my connection to the hard right libertarians. I do believe we have a responsibility to serve society.
Well, of course, but that is our...
No, I know. That's what I'm not arguing with you. I'm saying I think you were talking just the responsibility for your own actions.
Yeah.
And your own actions should be to serve others. Yeah. You can't complain. We're kind of going off on a tangent on this, but you can't complain about raising taxes for social programs if you're not doing anything to help people
yes.
who need help.
I see that all the time. Yeah.
You can't do that. You can't sit there and say, oh, well, the government shouldn't be doing it. Well, then who should be? Because no one else is. Oh, well, private charity. Okay, well, how much time have you volunteered at private charity?
Or how much money
all my
are
taxes
you
come out. Okay, that's fine. How much time? That's why I always argue time. You can make the argument.
I always say time.
If the government wasn't taking away my money, I would donate it.
Well,
okay, then how much time are you donating?
I always say it doesn't matter how much money you have. You can always give your time. There's always time to give. That's what I always say because people always like, well, I don't have the money to give. Well, you have time.
Time is more valuable than money to charities
Hands
too.
down.
Right now, my children's school, they're doing they call it every year, they do the armory dinner, and it's great for the kids. It really is, because they go down to the food bank and they feed homeless people, and the children volunteer and do it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they need volunteers right now. It's on a Thursday evening. We're actually going to be gone, which is why we're not doing it this year. But I reached out to the chair of it and said, hey, I know we still need some stuff. Can I donate money? blah, blah, blah. And she basically said, we need people. It's not that she didn't want the money would help, but they needed feet on the ground to help and serve. It's very easy to just, and that's the problem with government. Government, in our society in general, we cut a blind check and then we want to walk away.
Yeah.
We don't want to actually put in the labor. And there's more value to that. And that, the tie into this conversation is that goes to gun safety, that goes to our rights. If we want to keep these rights and these freedoms, this is where we're writing the right. This is where I get so frustrated with what I consider to be my side, the freedom advocates, who believe freedom with no responsibility.
Yeah, but they also believe in freedoms for the things they want freedoms for. I mean, I get a lot of that too. They
by
fight.
The conservatives, by the Republicans.
Yeah.
The libertarians, I will give them
Oh yeah, they're all just
freedom.
It's anarchy. That's what they really want. They want
They're
anarchy.
Anarcho-capitalists.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
But you lose me on that, because you can't have a society that individualistic.
Because
I don't want a collectivist society.
We're not a utopia. I mean, that's the reality. Is we all think differently, and as soon as you put us together with different thoughts, there is not peace.
And I say that to people all the time. I'm like, your view of communism is utopian, just like the libertarian view of capitalism is utopian. There has to be a good balance. Now, again, I am on the right. I believe that balance should lean much, much, much closer to capitalism than socialism. But what we have right now is too much of a blend in both of the wrong directions. Our capitalism is crony capitalism, so it's protected by the government to protect the wealthy to run their capitalist agenda.
Exactly.
We don't have capitalism that would benefit us. And that's the issue and the flaw.
Well, you know what's
capitalism.
funny is Eric actually.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Eric was actually telling me yesterday about Bill Gates. Basically, he didn't. He said it, but it's not quite what he meant. But he still said that capitalism saves lives. All of the things that he has done and all the money he's donated, he wasn't even talking about that. He wasn't talking about what did Eric say? $12 billion he's donated to third world countries and saving them. $12 billion. He was talking about the companies that he has invested in to help continue to help those third world countries. All of these things that needed to exist to build up these third world countries that couldn't exist without capitalism.
Well, China's basically building Africa right now.
Yeah.
Building their infrastructure for capitalist reasons.
Yeah.
And everyone can be as mad at greed as they want, but capitalism
if they're building capitalism in Africa, there's jobs for people, which creates structure, and then they can have clean water, and they can have homes, and they can have all these things that they don't have now because the government doesn't allow them to. I mean, what is the percentage of population that actually has money in Africa? It's such a small percentage of people.
I don't know.
And
again, I'm not using China as a bastion of capitalism.
Yes.
But China is, people can say what they want. Their economy has become very capitalistic. It's just, they're socially communist now.
Yeah.
They're really bad in those ways. But their economy, they realized that communism was failing and they adjusted their economy. But I'm just back to the personal responsibility. I can't say that enough. If you don't want those things to happen in our country, then grow up. Start carrying your own weight and start carrying the weight of others who need your help. Because if you don't, then the government's going to.
Yep.
Because too many people do care, but they don't care enough to help. The people who care, they want a virtue signal, they want to say they care, and they're willing to vote and just not have to look at it.
But that's how they feel they're helping. They feel they're helping by voting.
Yes, yeah. I agree.
And that's not helping.
It's not. You can look at anything, and I joke about it all the time. The government declares war on something.
Yes, I was going to say that earlier.
That something's going to win. The
War
government
on
declares
poverty.
war on poverty won. They declare war on guns won. They declare war on drugs won. They declare war on terror won.
Yeah.
It is what it is. So I think this probably...
And that's both a left and right thing. 2 of those were left and 2 of those were right.
Exactly. Yeah. The government isn't the solution. Government is the problem. Ronald Reagan was right about that. So,
Yep.
all right. I think that's a good place for us to wrap today.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, this is definitely a topic that was your topic to have, but
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening. I know this one was a little dry, a little slow, a little boring. I feel it's a very serious and should
other
be a
than
little
our
more
rap,
respectful.
we did throw a little bit of
Death
Dr.
Row,
Dre in there.
But thank you for listening. Please click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and check us out. We've got more to come. We'll see you next Friday.